to be able to see and hear is how people felt about getting bused to a different school, from kids to teachers. And you'll even hear from protesters, because a lot of people did not want this to happen. But in this first segment, again, you're going to see these different perspectives and what this meant for the kids interacting with one another and, of course, making new friends. So without further ado, here is our first segment in the Louisville, the bus stops here.
That's what he told us to do.
What's at the end of that sentence, Ben?
Exclamation mark.
Did you say it like an exclamation mark?
No.
Let me hear you say it.
And I'm all for going to jail if I've got to go to jail. I don't want to lose my job, but I'll go to jail. I'll stay in jail. I don't like this. I don't like the busing.
I just don't feel like he should have to be bused at Shawnee when we live right here and he could fall out of bed into Valley High. And I just don't want him to go down there.
I'm not prejudiced. I've always wanted a black friend, but I don't know. I just wanted to stay home and be at my home school with my friends.
It's going to always be some incidents, I think, as the year goes on, but I think the tenseness for me is over.
Well, I think everything's going to work out fine. You just have to leave it up to the individual themselves and let them work it out, I think. But I think it'll be all right.
Everybody seemed more than willing to get along. I was walking along in the hall this morning, and a girl was walking along in the other direction. She was black, and I smiled at her, and she got this big grin on her face and smiled too.
Louisville, the bus stops here. A Wave News special report. Here is anchorman David Robinson.
Good evening. Back in early September, at the dawn of busing for desegregation in Jefferson County, we all shared some pretty anxious moments. Now, in June, at the dusk of the school year, we wanted to revisit some of the families and individuals with whom we had shared those first nervous days. You might remember Scott Shanklin, who wasn't happy at the prospect of being bused, and Lisa Montgomery, who on September 4th looked forward to her new experience with mixed emotions. Melissa Forsyth, who spent a day with each youngster when school started, recently shared their thoughts on the first year of busing.
Well, if Lisa and Scott are representative, then making the adjustment to desegregation is apparently easier for younger children. 8-year-old Lisa Montgomery wasn't worried about school busing last September because long, reassuring talks with her mother helped eliminate fear of the unknown. Her first bus ride was exciting, but her first day at Miners Lane Elementary was lonely. Now, the class boycott is something Lisa barely remembers, and she has lots of friends, many of them white.
It was all right, and I made a whole lot of friends.
Did you make friends with white kids?
Mm-hmm. Got a whole lot of them. See, now that I got a lot of friends, I can talk to them, but when I first ride on the bus, I didn't have nobody to talk to because I didn't know that many people.
So what do you think about busing now?
I think it's all right. I think it's fun riding on the bus.
Black families like Lisa Montgomery's bear the brunt of busing, but it's what Marcia Montgomery wants for her children. Lisa's experience this year has convinced her mother the bus rides the road to a better education.
She's made good grades like she always has, and she didn't have too much to say about anything as far as the busing was concerned. She talked about the kids she met at school, and mostly I think what intrigued her more than anything was her Spanish. The subjects, learning something new, and she took gym every day out there. They have a beautiful gym there, and she's looking forward to going back, and I don't see any reason why she can't. And I think that after it got started, everybody should have felt a lot easier to find out that a lot of their fears were just that, unfounded. I think the kids do very well on their own.
Lisa's looking forward to going back to her new friends at school, but 12-year-old Scott Shanklin is sad because his bus ride is over, and he'll be leaving new friends at Shawnee Elementary. Scott was miserable the first 2 weeks of school, outspokenly opposed to busing, so scared, he says, he couldn't eat his lunch. He thought busing was silly, but 9 months of friendship with best pal Dwayne and others have changed his mind.
It's been pretty nice, a lot better than I thought it was. I think that they'd be pretty big guys, which they are, and I thought they'd really beat me up or something, but one of them's been real nice to me, and he's really helped me a lot. And I've really made a lot of friends, a lot more friends that I would make with white kids. I'm going to try to keep in touch with them. Blacks are just the same as us, human beings, and I think it's pretty nice. You get more friends, and there's nothing bad about it. Only thing is, you get home later. That's all.
His family thinks this year of busing has been a good experience for Scott. Mother Sandy Shanklin says Scott has had problems but has learned a lot.
After the first 2 weeks, he's had a real good year. The first 2 weeks, it was bad. We used, his dad and I together, I guess, used every ounce of child psychology we knew. And he was the most miserable little boy I've ever seen in my life. He just was unhappy with the school and with being bused. And we kept saying, you know, it'll get better and you'll meet new people and you'll make new friends. And, you know, this is easier said than done. And then as time went along, well, of course, he made new friends. And now, you know, he does fine. So, in fact, probably academically, he's had the best year he's ever had because he's had 4 marvelous teachers. He's been busy. He's not been bored. And it's been a good experience for him. I'm not an advocate of the busing, but he has had a good experience.
So for Lisa and Scott, David, this first experience with desegregation has been a positive one, but we can't say that's true for every family.
Well, it was not a good experience in the view of Mrs. David McGinney of Valley Station. She cried on September 4th and joined the boycott rather than permit her son to be bused. Dave Nagdeman says many interesting things have happened to the McGinney family since then.
Stephen McGinney can still roll out of bed at the last minute and make it to school on time. That's because the 16-year-old sophomore has been attending his home school of Valley most of the year, although he was scheduled to be bused to Shawnee. Mrs. McGinney gave up her boycott after the first week of school, and Stephen was bused to Shawnee for 3 days. Mrs. McGinney says he then developed high blood pressure and frequent headaches. A doctor diagnosed the problem as nerves, and the school system quickly gave him a medical exemption. Her 6-year-old daughter, Pamela, is slated to attend first grade next year, but Mrs. McGinney, who still is firmly opposed to busing, has pre-enrolled her in a Catholic school. She says she never considered moving out of the county.
I wouldn't give up my home and move out, no. I wouldn't run from it. Even if I had to send them to public school, I wouldn't run from it because it's going to go everywhere. But I don't feel like the people are ready to run from it like they were at first. You know what I mean? I think that they're either going to stand up and try to get something done, or else they're going to put them in private schools. There's a lot of people who probably can't afford it, and I'm not saying I can, but I'm sure going to try.
All right, so just recapping some of the things you just watched, you started to hear those different perspectives on how people really started to feel. And reminder, this was September 4th, 1975. That first full year of busing had just completed. And for some people, this was their first time interacting with someone who was different than them. So we're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to start in with the second segment. Okay, so now we've seen some of these first attitudes that people had about busing, and now we're going to see how they were handling the potential. And what I'm talking about is some people went as far as to move or put their houses up for sale. We also will get to see how some of the high schools looked, and we're talking about like Shawnee High School and how things started to change there, and how all of this impacted athletics. So again, there's a lot to cover. So without further ado, here is the second segment.
Linda and Shannon Constant took a different escape route. They owned their home in this mobile home park off Miners Lane and allowed their 8-year-old daughter Ivy to be bused to an inner city school. That is until March, when they decided they'd had enough. Ivy Constant still rides a bus to school, but now it's only a 1.5 mile trip between her Shepherdsville home in Bullitt County and school. Her mother contends Ivy was receiving an inferior education at the inner city school in Louisville and was behind her classmates when she enrolled at the Shepherdsville school in March.
We give up a house trailer that was paid for to move out here, and we're buying this house, and it's costing us a lot more. I mean, which in a way we can't really afford, but we trying.
You feel that it's worth it to get away from busing?
Yes, because like I said, she was gonna have to be bused again. They said in a couple of years, and I figured my son would be too, and wouldn't know what school they'd be going to or nothing. So I think it's worth it to me.
I don't think they should force people to go to schools out of their own district or schools they don't want to go to. I just think the sacrifice that we've made is worth it.
The Constants, who have one other child, 4-year-old Shane, live on Social Security. He says he's been unable to work because of a chronic back ailment. He says house payments run over $140 per month, and she's looking for a job. The Constant case probably is not typical of families who pull their children from the Jefferson County school system the first year of busing. The majority apparently entered private schools. Officials say experience in other cities indicates the exodus to other communities really begins during the summer after the first year. Dave Nochteman, Wave News Watch.
Shawnee principal John Whiting grabbed a bullhorn and got things organized that first day of school. The racial makeup of his student body and staff had changed radically. Robin Brown reports on some other changes at Shawnee.
When I look at the 850 students that we have here, I certainly feel good about it. But we had anticipated 1,300 students.
That's just one of the negative realities of this first year of school desegregation for Shawnee Principal John Whiting. Desegregation changed Shawnee from a predominantly all-black to a predominantly all-white student body and faculty this year. Whiting says both students and faculty have adjusted well to a difficult situation, and the students that did attend have not suffered academically. But desegregation may mean the end of most extracurricular activities in the former all-black schools in which they excelled and dominated for years. Participation in the marching band, track, golf, and swimming has suffered, and Shawnee's outstanding basketball program will also hurt in future years. Whiting says some of the programs may be completely lost.
Because the students have developed loyalties to other schools, and since they realize in most instances that they won't be at Shawnee but for a short time, they don't develop the loyalty or the school spirit for our school.
The loss of some athletic programs is a real possibility in Shawnee's future, but Whiting, a former coach, views it from a positive aspect.
When I hear one of our cheers is we're number one, I think one of the biggest problems in our society is, the thrust that everybody wants to be number one. And, that's part of the whole issue of desegregation. Is one group feels that they are superior to another group, or one school feels that it's superior to other schools. Looking at it in an optimistic vein, maybe, we can become academic centers or academic satellites in our clusters.
John Whiting admits that he was a little surprised and unprepared for the court order that brought busing for desegregation this year, but he says it was long overdue. He says the year has brought both negative and positive accomplishments. On the negative side, Shawnee has a long and proud tradition in athletics, as exemplified by the trophies in this case. That may be gone forever. School spirit has also diminished, and with a 70 to 80% student turnover each year, that may also be gone forever. But Whiting says he's proud of his students, proud because they've adjusted to a very difficult situation. They've adjusted much better than their parents in most cases. This is Robin Brown, Wave News Watch at Shawnee High School.
Remember Dorothy Stiltner? With only 1 year of teaching experience behind her, she was transferred to Central as part of the staff desegregation. Stan Coleman says this year was one of professional and personal maturing for the young teacher.
For Dorothy Stiltner, the change posed a number of challenges. She had little experience with black children and no experience with the black community. At 24, Dorothy had come from J-Town High School as a rookie teacher. She was sent here to Central High School in the heart of the inner city, where she found out it was like starting over again.
The limits are not set. At J-Town, it's an established school. The limits of teacher tolerance are set. And the kids will push you to a certain extent, and they know where to stop. Here, sky's the limit, you know. New school, new teachers, new administration, push them as far as they'll go. I've learned that I think everybody has prejudice in them. Even if you say you don't have prejudice, I think everybody has it deep down inside of them. And sometimes it takes rough situations to bring it out and, you know, clear it out.
From a young, inexperienced teacher, Dorothy has grown. And from that growth, she has formulated a philosophy.
Be prepared for anything and be as strict as you can and be as hard as you possibly can at the very beginning, so that the kids know where you are coming from, where you stand, you know, and what you are going to do in a certain situation.
Dorothy feels she has matured as a teacher. For her, the first year of a new social experience is over. As a teacher, she'll take each year as it comes, moving ahead with what she's learned. Dorothy Stiltner learned a lot at Central, and next year, she'll be back, walking these same halls. Stan Coleman, Wave News Watch.
For many of us, busing meant setting the alarm clock earlier, and the first people to meet our sleepy-eyed, often grumpy children in those early morning hours were the bus drivers, like Mrs. Elizabeth Barker. Diane Bryant reports that the drivers were subject to the hostilities of the children, parents, and sometimes their own feelings.
It's 6:25 a.m. and time for school bus 570 to leave the Old Nicholas compound on its first westward run. The driver, Elizabeth Barker, has worked for the county schools for 10 years, but this past year has been most difficult. After overcoming initial opposition from her family about driving, she then had to face uncooperative students.
The earlier getting up time, the later getting home time, the longer drives, which is much harder for me and for the children. That would be the biggest thing. Their attitudes has been hostile. They resent the fact that they're having to come out here to school and resent the fact that I'm having to bring them. I've had to refuse to haul them home a couple of times because of bad behavior, having them suspended from the bus for a number of days at a time.
These students feel it's unfair for the driver to punish the whole group, and they resent suspensions. Some told me that they don't want to be bused and feel that the driver and the school authorities are prejudiced. Mrs. Barker disagrees.
The parents don't try to make their children understand that this is something that we're all going to have to do. And I think parents don't show enough interest in their children. We have some that really want to go to school, and I think it will. Some of them are just putting in their time until they get old enough or kicked out enough that they will leave school. I don't know that they'll ever respect me as a person, but maybe when their children start riding a bus, they'll understand what it is.
Despite the difficulties this past year, Elizabeth Barker will be back at the wheel in the fall. She's optimistic about the adjustment the children have made, but the lingering anger and bitterness over busing is something the school authorities and parents will have to resolve. Diane Bryant, Wave News Watch.
So many different perspectives captured in that last segment. And just to recap for those who may be joining us, the racial makeup really changed drastically for some of these schools, especially when you take a look at Shawnee High School and how this impacted, I guess you call it that school spirit and the athletic programs. But also, the kids had a resentment towards their bus drivers themselves. They felt like, they were the ones a part of this whole new change and what they were experiencing. So it was a shared sentiment felt by many. But we're going to take a quick break before we dive into that last segment where we'll get to see how people protested against these changes. Okay, welcome back. We have one more segment to cover in this first episode of Wave Rewind in the Louisville, the Bus Stops Here episode. So you've already got to hear from students and teachers and even a principal about how they felt about busing in that first year and even some parents. Now we're going to look at the anti-movement, the anti-busing movement, so to say, the protesters. People were protesting on that very first day, and it felt like an impact on not just the schools, but the neighborhoods for many of these protesters. And then you'll also get to hear the emotional side of what brought them out to protest against the desegregation of schools and busing. So here we go with the last segment of Louisville, the Bus Stops Here.
Who wanted his opposition to busing to be visible and vocal. Cameron Harper says Stott's attitudes haven't changed much.
Gil Stotts did take his protest to the streets of Louisville that first morning. He didn't go to jail for it, but he did end up at both confrontations with police. Stotts lives in a middle-income neighborhood. Like many of his neighbors, he's a blue-collar worker, drives a truck for Armor Foods. The interesting thing about Stotts' neighborhood is that much of it is for sale. Since those early days in September, Stotts has continued to fight busing his way. He's not a member of any particular anti-busing group, but says he's taken part in numerous protests and marches. Gil Stotts says he knows well the taste of tear gas.
Why do you think the anti-busing movement hasn't been more successful in stopping busing?
Really, because we don't have, somebody like Dr. Martin Luther King as a leader. I think he done great for his people, and we need somebody to do great for us now that, I respect the man as a man, and, it's what he did.
There's a bit of irony here. This mock grave symbolizing the death of freedom represents as well as anything the feeling about court-ordered busing in this section of the county. But that sign is being replaced by this sign, and Gil Stotts, the man who said he'd go to jail to protest busing, now says he'll sell out if he has to keep his child from being bused next year. Cameron Harper, Wave News Watch.
The organized anti-busing movement is alive and well. Kathleen Partlow says while enthusiasm of the group still runs high, their tactics have changed.
The anti-busing movement is made up of several distinct groups, each one choosing a different method of protest. Many of these groups are several years old, but when the school year started, their fight began in earnest. A united boycott was the theme of one of the oldest anti-busing groups, Concerned Parents. Leader Sue Connor, at a rally the night before school started, urged members to keep their kids at home, to protest busing, and to break the system financially. The boycott failed. Connor was placed under a federal injunction not to march her groups without permits. Today, she works on and through politicians.
Never really different from our original inducement of working very closely, as we have in the beginning, with our elected officials, those that we can depend on. Naturally, we knew the boycott would subside, but it was, we felt, was needed at the time that it was called.
Looking back on this past year and all the work you did to fight court-ordered busing, would you do anything differently?
I don't think that I should have permitted myself to have been swept up in the emotion that definitely there was. And I think that I'm still feeling that emotion.
Joyce Bond heads the oldest group, Save Our Community Schools. Working through the system is how she describes SOC's approach. All year, members have worked with the human relations programs. Spahn talks about anti-bussers joining forces.
I am talking about unified purpose, which is to end busing. And if we can unify on a few issues, such as working toward getting people in Congress that will reflect our views, if we can work toward one of our current efforts is telegram and letter writing campaigns nationally to Attorney General Leva. And if we can unite in those kind of things, we can be successful.
In the beginning, there were spontaneous, violent protests. When those were finally squelched by police, the organized activist groups such as Citizens Against Busing took hold. Last fall, Bill Kellerman's anti-bussers marched and waved placards. Today, their tactics have changed, such as to a freedom fund to finance an alternative busing plan.
The Citizens Against Busing has come from an anti-busing group. Now, anti-busing is still our first and foremost goal, but we have become a political pressure group also. We are trying to apply pressure on the politicians and the people that have been responsible for getting into this situation to get, number one, to get us out of it. Number two, to prevent them from trying to get us into anything like it in the future. Enter the American Freedom Fund. This is a form of protest that everybody can take part in. The confidence and the confidentiality will be maintained. No one knows who will contribute except the contributor himself, and of course the members of the board of the American Freedom Fund. But this is one of the reasons we have gotten into this more sophisticated means of protest, and it is in order to try to delay anything like what's happening in Boston this year.
These anti-bussers left their home ground in the South End to take protesting to the East End. The latest group, ULAB, or Union Labor Against Busing, tried in vain to unify the movement. ULAB marched on Shelbyville Road, it marched in the suburbs, but in the end, Jack Shore's ULAB marched alone.
People told us when we went out there that we shouldn't, that people would, they'd be afraid of us, they'd get hot at us, they wouldn't participate. We feel like we have got some participation on now.
You had to look back on this last year, all the effort you put into ending busing. Would you do anything differently?
I haven't done anything that I wish I hadn't done. There was probably a few marches where there were some incidents that happened that I wish I could have stopped and I couldn't. As far as doing anything different, I don't think I'd do anything different except maybe try to put more heat on the politicians than we did. We kindly slacked off of them when it first began. We got on the local politicians. They said they couldn't do anything. I believe possibly we should have went right to the top when we started out and laid off the mayor and the county judge and got right to the top of the problem.
These anti-busing leaders promised there would be no marching this spring, but they also insist the anti-busing movement is alive and well, and they're out to play politics in this election year as the final way to fight busing. David?
There are still a few proposed alternatives to busing being reviewed by the courts, but without an unexpected ruling or some unlikely action by Congress, it appears that busing for desegregation will still be a fact of life when next September rolls around. Superintendent Ernest Grayson led the school system through this first hectic year of merger and busing. Roger O'Neill talked with him about the past and the future.
Mr. Grayson, in looking back at a school year that one might have expected a lot of problems, there were a lot of problems out in the street, but the in-school problems were significantly reduced. There were very little, in fact. Do you have any thinking as to why those tensions were kept at a minimum?
Well, I think possibly, Roger, the fact that after the smoke and the flames had sort of cleared and we began to get into school, parents began to realize that we had to get on with this job of education. I think PTAs and many community groups pitched in to help us. I think that our staff, I know our staff worked many, many hours of beyond the normal day to ensure that the school was operating and that they were getting into a program. I would have to say this too, that I think that that this community really worked hard to help us out on this program.
I guess we don't give credit, too, to the students themselves who, despite the tension and the anxiety that can develop from day to day, they had to do a lot to keep the in-school problems down to a minimum.
Yes, I think this is true, and I had a group of students that met with me this past school year, and it was pretty interesting, some of their comments, and they were pretty perceptive, and most of them said, well, this is my year to go to school, and I'm going to try to make the best of it.
Those of us who have been covering this story for the entire year, and I'm sure you were probably in the same boat that we are, have heard comment after comment from parents and even students to a degree that they just were not learning this school year, that academically the school system had fallen flat on its face. I know that the system has done a system-wide testing program of students while you've got no base to go back and compare to the beginning of the year. What's your assessment? Has there been learning going on this year to the degree that it went on the year before desegregation?
Well, Roger, I think I'd have to say in all candor that probably we haven't done as well as we could have this year. I think for example, the first quarter this year was, as you know, we had many problems there with transportation, SAMA teachers, shortages of books and supplies and all these things. So I think really the first quarter was a fairly standstill type of operation, but I think the second quarter we moved a little bit more, and the third quarter I felt really good about this year, and I think there has been learning to take place. I think just a matter of working with a changed staff, with a changed student body, all of these things this year. I think by the end of the last quarter, we begin to get those things together, and I frankly hope that next year will even be better.
This year is over with now, for all practical purposes, and going into September of '74, the biggest headache that you've got is a $8 to $10 million budget deficit. You've been able to eliminate $2 million by cutting some teachers. What else are you going to have to cut?
Well, we're trying to get some recommendations ready for the board. I think we have to look obviously at personnel, which happens to be the biggest share of our budget. Obviously, we'll look at those tried and true things, of supplies and contractual service and these type of things. But the big area has to be in the area of personnel.
Have you got to get into curriculum, into programs, and the things that are offered to students? Are those things going to have to be cut next year of necessity?
I think they will, Roger. And here again, what we will try to do is to create the least amount of damage that we can in terms of programs for children. Obviously, basic classroom programs must go on. I think what we have to do is look in those areas of special instructional services that we're presently offering that are sort of adds a little extra dimension to the students' programs in the schools. These areas we'll have to look at because with the with the problems that we have in well, I should say this in terms of other areas. Of course, we'll be looking at them tried and true things like maintenance and operation and supplies and these type of things.
Your extracurricular activities suffered this year primarily because of that loyalty factor to the school was somewhat destroyed this year because of desegregation. Would you think that that would be the first area that would have to be cut, the extracurricular type activities?
I'm not ready to say at this time. To me, that seems to be a pretty important part of trying to get students to accept their schools, and I think I'd have to look pretty hard at that. But here again, all items would be under consideration.
Okay, Mr. Grayson, thank you very much for being with us.
My pleasure.
Of course, each family will make its own reflections on this school year, and those reflections will shape the attitude of our community for the coming year. I suppose the most positive attitude we saw came from the children, parents, and staff at Roosevelt School. They fought to keep their school open, and when they learned their fight had succeeded, one young man expressed just how close a school and a child can be.
They teach me how to read. They teach me how to write. They teach me everything I know.
Well, guys, that concludes the first episode in Wave Rewind. Louisville, the bus stops here. If you would like to see any of the other episodes that we have already uploaded, you can do so by visiting wave3.com or downloading Wave Now, our streaming app. Remember, there are so many other episodes and stories that are in our archives, and we plan on bringing them to you. So stick with us. This is Marissa Burke from Wave Rewind.